It was as British a celebration as you could possibly have, about royalty, nostalgia.
Here and now, I can tell you there's a lot of genuine warmth and excitement, people just wanting to be involved.
The British monarchy may be world famous for putting on a show, but they outdid themselves this time.
Well, there are still many, many boats to come past HMS President.
This is a massive event for London, and it's a great chance for us.
And at this point, let me introduce you to a gentleman who's
Is this pageant. They'll remember it for a long time, even if they try to forget the weather.
Well-wishers and a few dogs packed the riverbanks to honour their sovereign's 60-year reign.
With Her Majesty the Queen aboard, with His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, and members of the royal family.
Ordinary atmosphere here as the boats make their way down to Tower Bridge, where the Queen will eventually get off.
Celebrating the river, which is the origin and source of so much of our commercial success.
Every type of boat imaginable, many bearing the flags of the Commonwealth, led the way for the royal barge.
down at Cadogan Pier. Duchess of Cambridge.
British Queen who leads by example. She may be 86 years old, but she stood for hours.
Indeed, the 86-year-old Queen herself stood for the 3-hour duration of the pageant, albeit undercover.
June 3rd, 2012. The River Thames. Cold, grey, drizzling. 1 million people had come anyway. They lined every bridge. They packed the embankment 7 deep. They stood in the rain with Union Jacks pressed against their coats, waiting for one woman on one gilded barge to sail past them. And when she did, when the Spirit of Chartwell finally appeared through the grey, they roared. But there was something else happening on that barge, something the cameras caught without fully understanding what they were seeing. The Queen was watching, not just the flotilla, not just the 1,000 boats stretching 7 miles across the Thames. She was watching the young woman standing next to her grandson, composed, smiling, steady, in temperatures that had sent the rest of the family retreating for warmth below deck. And what the Queen saw that afternoon would shape how she thought about the future of this family. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. To understand why that moment mattered, you have to understand what kind of day it actually was. The Thames Diamond Jubilee Pageant on June 3rd, 2012, was the largest flotilla on the River Thames in 350 years. Organizers confirmed that 670 boats, 250 of them man-powered, sailed a 7-mile route from Wandsworth to Tower Bridge. The Guinness Book of World Records would later name it the largest ever parade of boats ever assembled. More than 1 million spectators stood along the route to watch it pass. The Queen had been on the throne for 60 years, 6 decades. This was the day the nation chose to mark that, a day planned down to the minute. The Belfry barge leading at the front, the bells ringing from Whitechapel, the London Philharmonic at the rear, the route timed bridge by bridge so that the Spirit of Chartwell arrived at Tower Bridge precisely at 4 o'clock. It was magnificent. It was also absolutely freezing. The weather that Sunday was, as the AP reported at the time, cold and drizzly. Wind came off the water. Hundreds of thousands of people who had come to line the route stood in it for hours. The Queen wore gloves and a heavy coat. She used a pashmina for most of the journey, a small personal concession to the conditions that photographers caught on the upper deck. The royals aboard the Spirit of Chartwell stood exposed, no walls, no shelter, just the gilt canopy overhead and the cold Thames air coming at them as the barge moved downstream at 4 knots through bridge after bridge after bridge. The party spent 4 hours on that deck. 4 hours waving, smiling, acknowledging the boats and the crowds. According to the Crown Chronicles, when the barge docked briefly at HMS President midway through, the younger royals did what any sensible person would do. They went below deck to warm up and get a drink. They were quickly called back up by the Queen. That detail matters. The Queen herself, at 86 years old, on a cold and drizzly afternoon, had not gone inside. And she expected the people representing this family to be where the public could see them. Catherine had been a member of the royal family for just over a year. She and William had married at Westminster Abbey on April 29, 2011. The wedding had been watched by an estimated 2 billion people worldwide. She had walked in as Catherine Middleton and walked out as the Duchess of Cambridge, a title, a role, a set of expectations that came with no instruction manual and no second chances. The year between the wedding and that flotilla had been a careful introduction. She had carried out engagements. She had attended ceremonies. She had learned the rhythms, when to smile, when to step back, and when to let someone else be the focal point of the room. But the Diamond Jubilee was different. This was the biggest public event the monarchy had staged in a generation. Every camera was on this barge. Every journalist in the country had a long lens trained on the royal party. And the woman who had asked for guidance before her very first solo meeting with the Queen, who had adjusted her hair in the car on the way to Buckingham Palace, nervous about what to wear and what to say, was now standing on the most visible platform in Britain. She wore red, a bespoke Alexander McQueen dress designed by Sarah Burton, wool crepe in a deep crimson with sleeves added and a boat neck. A quiet nod, some commentators noted, to the nautical occasion. It was a deliberate choice. The Queen wore white, Camilla wore a muted trench, and Catherine wore red, vivid, confident, unmistakable against the gray of the river and the gray of the sky. Some outlets at the time asked whether she had upstaged the Queen. It was the wrong question. The right question was why, on the most important day of the monarch's public year, the Duchess of Cambridge had chosen to be that visible, that present, rather than carefully fading into the background. The Queen had known Catherine for longer than most people realized. Before the engagement was even announced, before the sapphire ring was back on Catherine's finger, the Queen had been paying close attention. Russell Myers, the Mirror's royal editor, documents in his 2026 biography, William and Catherine, how the Queen had intervened at a critical moment, the 2007 breakup, in ways that set the entire relationship back on course. When William ended things that year, Myers writes that the Queen sensed something was wrong. She invited William to Sunday lunch to, as one well-placed source described it, judge his mood. What she found was a young man who was, according to that source, completely broken. The Queen, who understood, perhaps better than anyone alive, what it cost a person to walk away from the one thing that grounded them, listened. She did not tell him what to do. That was never her way. But she made her view known. And 3 years later, when Catherine came back into the family, officially this time, with a ring and an announcement and the weight of everything that would follow, the Queen did something that struck those around her as significant. She asked to meet her alone. According to Myers' account, drawing on a former courtier, it was an unusual gesture. Catherine had met the Queen before on several occasions. But this was different. This was the Queen asking to see the woman her grandson was about to marry, privately, before the wedding, without aides listening, without protocol directing the conversation. Catherine was nervous. She sought advice from staff on what to wear. She adjusted her hair in the car. She touched up her makeup before being met by the Queen's private secretary and taken to a room where afternoon tea had been laid out. What happened in that room, Myers writes, was more than pleasantries. The Queen offered words of encouragement about Catherine's future role as a senior member of the family. She passed down advice, drawn from 70 years of marriage to a man the world described as difficult and who the palace knew was intensely his own person, on how to navigate life beside a headstrong husband. And then she did something that, according to Myers, left Catherine genuinely startled. She offered to lend her something from her personal jewelry collection for the wedding, not a loan arranged by staff, a personal gesture from the monarch herself. Catherine left the meeting, Myers writes, with a spring in her step. The Queen had made a choice that day. She had decided this woman was worth investing in. That context is what makes the footage from the flotilla so worth watching carefully. Catherine did not go below deck when the others did. She stood. She stayed on the upper deck while the cold came off the water and the barge kept moving. When the younger royals were recalled by the Queen, summoned back to visibility, back to duty, Catherine was already there. The Queen had spent 7 decades understanding what it meant to hold your position when everything in you wanted to step back. She knew what it looked like when someone had the instinct for this, and what it looked like when they didn't. She had watched plenty of people who were connected to this family by marriage or birth find the public-facing part of royal life quietly unbearable. Catherine, standing in the cold on that deck in her red Alexander McQueen, was not performing endurance. The footage shows her engaged, turning to William, turning to Harry, pointing out boats, watching the crowds, present. The composure was not the stiff, managed composure of someone white-knuckling their way through a difficult afternoon. It was something more settled than that. Catherine herself, speaking years later in the documentary Our Queen at 90, gave a small glimpse into how the Queen's approach had shaped her. She's been very generous in not being forceful at all, Catherine said, in any of her views. But I feel she's been there. A gentle guidance, really, for me. She also described how, at her first Christmas at Sandringham with the family, she had made the Queen homemade chutney, a simple domestic gift. Not a jewel, not a ceremony. And the next morning, it was on the table. I think such a simple gesture went such a long way, Catherine said. That exchange tells you something about what both women were looking for in each other. Not deference, not performance, something more real than that. The flotilla ended as Tower Bridge came into view. A 41-gun salute sounded from HMS Belfast. The bascules of Tower Bridge rose to their full 80 degrees, a salute to the barge and the woman on it. The London Philharmonic played. 4 hours after it had begun, the procession concluded at the embankment. The fireworks that had been planned were cancelled because of the weather. It didn't matter. 1 million people had stood in the rain for this, and most of them said it was worth it. The Queen, by every account, was moved. In a broadcast she gave after the 4-day Jubilee weekend, she said the events had been, in her own words, a humbling experience.
The events that I have attended to mark my Diamond Jubilee have been a humbling experience.
She said it had touched her deeply to see so many families celebrating together. The balcony appearance that closed the 4-day celebrations, the carriage procession, the crowd on the Mall, was noted by royal commentators for something specific. The Queen appeared on that balcony with only the senior family members: Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, Harry. The BBC's royal correspondent Peter Hunt said at the time that the choice sent a message, one about continuity, about who the future of this family was. Catherine was among those chosen to stand there. In the years after the flotilla, the Queen's relationship with Catherine continued to deepen, in ways documented not in grand ceremonies, but in small, visible moments. The chutney on the Christmas table, the borrowed jewellery, the gentle guidance Catherine described, present but never forceful. Russell Myers, writing in 2026, with the perspective of someone who had watched this relationship develop across 15 years, framed the Queen's attitude toward Catherine as one of genuine warmth and deliberate mentorship. She had seen something in this woman before the wedding and invested in it, and what she saw in the Thames on June 3rd, 2012, confirmed what she had already believed. The monarchy moves slowly. It does not hand authority. It observes, over time, whether someone has what the institution requires, and then it acts accordingly. The Queen had been watching, and the woman in the red Alexander McQueen dress, steady against the cold, was already approved. What the flotilla captured, or without quite naming it, was the beginning of something the royal family would come to depend on. The woman who had been nervous in the car on the way to Buckingham Palace was becoming someone the monarch trusted. Not because she was flawless, not because the transition had been easy, but because she had the instinct to stay on deck when the cold came, to stand where she was supposed to stand, to be present in the way the institution required. The Queen had spent 60 years understanding that distinction, and she knew it when she saw it. What she noticed about Catherine on the Diamond Jubilee Flotilla was not a single moment. It was a confirmation of a decision already made, quietly over afternoon tea, and a choice Catherine had been making, one public appearance at a time, ever since. Subscribe to Royal Archives for more stories like this. The private moments and documented history that shaped the monarchy we know today